Hi, I'm Josh from thelovepirate.net, and this is All Real Drive. This is my new video series, hopefully a podcast, where I get to talk about movies in a way that's a little less formal, a little more fun maybe than reviews and analysis on my blog. So why am I in my car and getting ready to drive to work? Well, I recently went to the D23 Expo in Anaheim, and I'm driving back 7 hours in the car, and I thought, I'm talking to myself and running through all the things that I saw and talking like there's somebody else in the car, and of course there's not, it's just me. And I thought, I wish I had my GoPro so that I could record this, just because I was working through a lot of things. So I thought, well, I spend an hour a day in the car going to and from work. Why don't I record that? And I can do the same thing I'm doing and talk about things that I like and use my commute in a way where I obviously can't write for my blog while I'm driving. So this is the first episode. I'm going to go ahead and get underway, driving to work. Hopefully I can do this without crashing and killing myself. There is also, in honor of my first podcast video, there's going to be a giveaway of an exclusive Star Wars The Force Awakens poster that was given out at the D23 Expo to everyone who went to the live action presentation. You'll find out more about that at the end of the video, but it's a really cool poster designed exclusively for Expo attendees, and it's there are probably only maybe 10,000 of these that are ever going to be made. And they're currently going for $100 to $150 on eBay. So that's not bad either. But I'll put, I'll talk about how to win or enter to win at the end of this video. And then I will also put instructions on my blog. But you'll be able to enter on Twitter, Tumblr, or here on YouTube. So what am I going to talk about? Well, I thought, I just got back from the D23 Expo last week. Why didn't I talk about the movies that were debuted and discussed, and we got first looks and cast members and all that. And I covered all 3 days and recaps on my blog, but, I thought, why not look at just the movies? Because my blog's a movie blog, and movies are what I love, so we're going to go through those one at a time, both the animation presentation and the live action, and just, trying to get a sense of what the end result of these movies might be like, beyond just the couple of clips they showed or the concept art or the discussion of characters and what have you. So the first afternoon of the expo was the animation presentation that was hosted by John Lasseter in one of his trademark Hawaiian shirts. Let me interrupt myself for a second just to say that I recorded this video a few days ago, and when I went to edit it, I realized that it was way too long for one video, so I split it into two pieces. So what you're watching right now, you could call episode 1A, which is just going to cover the animation news from the D23 Expo, which is Disney, animation, and Pixar. And then for the live action portion, you'll have to check out video 1B, which I will post at the same time. So thanks, and I'll see you again at the end. And they decided to do Disney first, probably saving Pixar for last because he's a Pixar guy. So the first movie they talked about was Zootopia, which is one we've seen a little teaser trailer for that shows us some of the characters. But it was not, it's funny, everyone knew Finding Dory was going to be at the expo, and all of these other great movies Moana, the movies that people are really looking forward to. So they announced Zootopia, and the directors came out, and the response was kind of tepid. People applauded, and were kind of, I'm interested, but it did not get a big cheer the way some of these other movies did. So Zootopia is set in a world designed by animals for animals. That's sort of their main pitch. And it's John Lasseter talked about, the classic Disney films where animals wore clothing and stood upright. Think like Robin Hood, for example. And he wanted to do sort of a modern take on those. The directors talked about all the research they did of, how do animals move and how will they, how would that translate to walking on two legs and what would their habitats look like if they designed houses. And so there's like a Sahara Desert kind of part of the city, and then there's like Bunnyburg that's got a little population meter that's constantly counting up because they're rabbits, and that sort of thing. And they talked about the polar bears don't have white fur, they have clear fur, they're white skin, and so that all went into the animation, but it was kind of dry. And so Jennifer Goodwin, who voices Judy Hopps, the main character, who's a little bunny who wants to be a member of the police force, she came out to introduce her character, and they talked about how, her Judy Hopps wants to be in the police force, but she's tiny, and all the other police officers are big, like wildebeests or I don't know, buffalo, big animals, big muscly animals, and she's this tiny little rabbit, so she gets put on parking meter detail, writing parking tickets, and we didn't see a clip of it during the animation presentation, but later there was a separate Zootopia where they showed a clip of her sort of chasing after a criminal while she's basically being a meter maid, that gets her a little more attention and gets her put on a case. But they showed two clips from the film, and it was amazing how quickly the audience's feelings about Zootopia changed, because the clips were hilarious and far better than I think anybody really expected. The first clip showed her introduction to Nick Wilde, who's a fox voiced by Jason Bateman, who is at this ice cream parlor with a tiny little fox, a little baby fox, trying to get an ice cream bar for the little baby fox. And it's obviously a con. And he's laying on this story real thick about, the elephant won't give him a ice cream bar because it's 3 times the size for elephants. It's 3 times the size of this little baby fox. And he lays on the story about how, I just adopted him this morning. It was the best decision I ever made, but I don't have enough money to buy him one, and I promised he'd get one, and it's his birthday. And Judy Hopps is like 3 people back in line and is hearing it, and is totally wrapped up in this con man story. And she, Nick Wilde says the real kicker is, and this little baby fox, he thinks he's an elephant, and the little fox pulls up this hood and he's got an elephant costume on, and it's the cutest thing ever, and he starts wandering around like a toddler, going to all of the patrons, all the elephants in this ice cream shop with the little trunk, and it was everybody. It was so cute, and somebody is making a mess of my car, which is one of the pluses of filming in my car. And eventually he talks the guy into giving him an ice cream bar, and Judy pays for it with her, so he gets this for free. And then there was a little montage of his real plan, which was to melt down this ice cream bar and form it into a bunch of tiny ones, which he then goes to the Lemming Brothers Bank, which is hilarious, to sell to lemmings. Of course, if one lemming buys it, they all got to buy it because they're lemmings. And these are the jokes, people. And then he collects all of their little wooden sticks from the bars after the lemmings are done, and he sells those to, I can't remember what they were, but some tiny, smaller animals as planks to build their houses. And so he makes thousands of dollars from this scheme from the one ice cream bar he got for free. And they described as how the story will progress, and Judy gets put on this case of a missing otter. And one of her leads is Nick Wilde, so they have to sort of team up. And she doesn't know, he's a fox and she's a rabbit. She doesn't really know if she can trust him, but she's got to work with him anyway. It's her only option. And one of their leads is they have a license plate from a car, a getaway car. And Nick says, "Okay, I've got a contact in the DMV, the Department of Mammal Vehicles." These are the jokes. We can go see him. His name is Flash. It'll be great. He'll get the information on the license plate for you. So the second clip that they showed was them going to the DMV, which is run by sloths. So they get up there to Flash, who's the Nick's friend or whatever. And, "Oh, can you run this?" And he's I think the sloth Flash was voiced by Zach Braff. Either it was or it was somebody who sounded exactly like Zach Braff. But it was so fun. It was one of those scenes that there's just one joke that he's so slow, but it gets funnier and funnier the longer the scene goes on. And Judy, of course, being a rabbit, is ready to go, and I want to get my, I want to get this information so we can get on the case. And he is, she reads the license plate out, 684-5832 or whatever, the license plate number, and he 6-3, and then Nick, because he's a jerk, interrupts and goes, "Hey, Flash, did you hear this joke?" And he tells him a joke. And Flash stares at him, and the smile slowly creeps on his face, and it's the funniest thing he's ever heard. So he's got to tell his office mate, but he says like one word every 10 seconds, and it's kind of hard to describe, but it was so funny and unexpected amount of humor from this movie that it looked cute, but nobody really had high expectations of it. So by the end, the big cheers for the movie when everybody left. And that's sort of, I'd never been to an expo or a Comic-Con or anything like that. And it's great to see what really good PR can do for a movie that people otherwise aren't excited about. This will create great word of mouth, and I've seen lots of articles in praise of the movie or the clips we saw, and it was just really, really fun. And now I can't wait for the movie to come out. It's something that doesn't translate in the trailer, but if you show clips and you get people talking, it can do really well. So the next movie that was up was a new reveal. I feel like I'd heard about it before, but maybe this was the first official confirmation. So John Lasseter talked about how many of the Disney versions of fairy tales are sort of the iconic version. When you think of The Little Mermaid, you don't think of Hans Christian Andersen, you think of Disney and Jodie Benson singing Part of Your World and Sebastian, what have you. Same with Beauty and the Beast and all of these others. But the one that they've never really taken on is Jack and the Beanstalk. So he announced the new film, Gigantic, which fits into the Tangled Frozen sort of naming convention of, no, we're not going to call it Jack and the Beanstalk, we're going to call it Gigantic. But he talked about how they decided to set it in Spain in the time of, exploration of the planet on great sailing ships, that Spain made some of the best ships, and this sense of exploration, which sort of helps give the film a thematic connection to the world it's set in, which was really neat. And so Jack, it's sort of the standard setup. Jack climbs beans, sells a cow for beans, throws the beans away, grow into a giant beanstalk, climbs up into the clouds where the giants live. But then things take sort of a twist, because the first giant he meets is an 11-year-old girl named Ima, who thinks he's a toy. And we didn't see any clips from the movie, but we saw a lot of concept art. And then they announced that Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, who did the music for Frozen, will be writing music for Gigantic. And they came out and sang one of the songs that it's still in the, still pre-production, so the song may not end up in the film at all, or it might be drastically changed, but it was called My Little Man, and it's the song that Ema sings once she's found Jack, and she thinks he's a toy, and, are you a bug, are you a toy, are you a little animal? He goes, I'm a man. She's like, I always wanted a man. And so she sings this, this cute little song that had very much the Lopez sort of humor to it. You think of, any of the songs that are not Let It Go from Frozen, they've got a lot of humor to them. Do you want to build a snowman or whatever? So Kristen Anderson Lopez sang, and Bobby Lopez sort of did Jack's noises throughout the song, where she sings about, I can make him ride a pony, and she's basically playing with him as a toy and singing about all the things that she can make him do. And eventually, he goes, and was trying to run away. And every now and then she goes, stop it, in the middle of the song. But the plot of it, and it was a cute, fun little song with concept art. But Ema is not, obviously not a villain like some of the giant fee-fi-fo-fum kind of giants you're used to in Jack and the Beanstalk. It turns out that within the giant world, it's not just one little family, it's an entire world of giants in the clouds. There is a war going on with the storm giants, who are sort of lording over all of the other giants. So Jack and Ema have to team up to stop the storm giants. And it sounded cute, and it was really too early to get a great sense of it. But there was one bit of concept art that really seemed to drive the image and the feeling of this movie home. And it was Ema sort of with her knees up to her chest. I don't know if she was crying or had been crying, but looking really sad. And Jack was standing on her knee, looking at her eye to eye, and had a hand on her shoulder or on her, on her face or whatever. And it was just really, it was kind of an emotional image that, if they can bring out this relationship between Jack, who's this guy who hates kids, they say, kids are annoying. And then if they can bring out this bond, they can really, I think it could be a really good film. It's way too early to know for sure. But it has potential, and it's one of the fairy tales that Disney hasn't really done yet. They've done, Mickey and the Beanstalk, and it was obviously a part of Into the Woods, but this is the first real Disney animation take on it. And finally, for Disney animation was Moana, and this was the one I was looking forward to the most. And it's, story set 2,000 years ago in the South Pacific, and Moana is the daughter of a chief of the tribe who, in her grandmother's time, they used to be great explorers, and they'd sail the ocean, but that stopped. And she wants to know why. She doesn't really understand, why this is a part of our heritage. Why don't we do it anymore? And this ties into some of the real history of the region. And her grandmother dies, and everyone went, oh, which of course, this is a Disney film, is what John Musker and Ron Clements, who are the directors who directed The Little Mermaid and many of the great Disney animated films of the Renaissance and beyond. This is a Disney film. But she sets out on this journey, and along the way she meets Maui, who is a demigod, who's voiced by Dwayne Johnson, who came out and got huge applause, and he really, of course, knows how to work a crowd. And he was charming and funny, and but he introduced us to Maui, this character, who he has all these tattoos, and the tattoos, Dwayne Johnson's half Samoan, and the tattoos in a lot of cases for people from the South Pacific tell stories from their lives, but they thought, well, what if his tattoos moved? So we get a little clip intro to Maui, who's telling the story of this, these great battles he's fought and whatever, and it's in sort of silhouetted animation, and then it zooms out and it's his tattoo, and he keeps telling the story, and his tattoo keeps dancing along or whatever until he finally looks down and goes, stop it. And he has this magical fish hook, which he can do all sorts of things. The legend says he even could raise islands from the bottom of the ocean with his magical fish. It's a giant fish hook. And so we get this clip of him showing off and, boasting about himself, and it cuts over to Moana, who's watching him, who looks completely unimpressed. And that they announced that, and I gotta find my notes here, they announced who would be doing the music for Moana, and the score is going to be done by Mark Mancina, who is one of my favorite film composers, and wrote the soundtrack to my favorite soundtrack, which is Twister, which, yeah, I know. But it's also going to have songs by Opataya Foa'i from the band Te Waka, which is a Samoan or South Pacific band, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, who I'm not really familiar with, but is an actor and songwriter. But the final clip, they talked about how they wanted the ocean to be a character in the film, more than just a setting. And they showed this image of Moana leaning against a palm tree right by the water, and there's this little tendril of the water coming out that sort of touch her feet. And it looked kind of weird. It was like, okay, that might be cool, it might be cheesy, but then they showed a clip, and it was by far the most emotional clip of any of the footage that we saw, either of the presentations. And it showed Moana as a toddler, and she's playing by the water, and this really pretty seashell washes up next to her. And then the water sort of recedes from it. And she giggles and runs out to pick it up. And then the ocean lays another seashell for her a little further into the water, but the water stays back in this sort of horseshoe shape to allow her to get to the seashell and be dry, not drown. And so it sort of keeps depositing seashells for her until she's in an area where the water would be well over her head, but it's just a wall of water, and she's dry. And there's sea turtles going by, and there's coral or fishes, and it's really, really beautiful. And she sort of she realizes what's happening, and she looks at the water and sort of forgets about the seashells, and this wave comes up, and it sort of just hangs there, and she looks at it, she sort of tilts her head, and it tilts to the side to match. It's a lot like the water tendril from The Abyss, but obviously much prettier, better effects, but just much more emotion. She sort of develops this connection with the water, and the water sees this girl who sort of appreciates it and understands the ocean, even at just a toddler level. And it reaches down in the water and sort of on her head and sucks up and makes her hair all stand up in this point, and she giggles and leaves her little bow at the top, and they're sort of having fun. And then her father, who's the chief, calls, and the wave sort of panics a bit, and it scoops her up in an empty sea turtle shell and rides her back to the shore and deposits her and reaches up and fixes her hair and gets rid of the shell, and before her father can get there, and then it goes back to normal calm, and then it puts the seashell back so she can have it, and and she waves at it, and it sort of waves, and she runs back into her. But it was really gorgeous and emotional. There's no dialogue. There's no, there's not even really any story to it. It's just, this sort of deep connection to nature, and it was really great. And everyone, the audience was really into it. And then they closed the Disney animation side by having Tevaka come out and perform with South Pacific regional dancers and sort of perform a song from the movie. And I don't know where the song takes place. We weren't even given a title for the song. But it was a really pretty... It felt like the sort of song that would be an intro song. You know, the sort of classic intro songs that are in Mysterious Fathoms Below or Arabian Nights. You know, it felt like one of those songs that sort of sets the stage in the opening moments of the film. I don't know that that's what it was, but it was very tied into that area of the world and great music. And it's wonderful to me that Moana is this film set in a very specific region, and they're casting actors who fit. At least the only actor we know of is Dwayne Johnson, but he is half Samoan. He fits that region. He understands it. Presumably, they're going to cast somebody who's Samoan or from the South Pacific to voice Moana. They're not whitewashing this story. It's something that happens a lot in Hollywood, not just at Disney. They didn't make Moana, the character in the art we saw, into some sort of skinny waif of a girl. She looks real. She looks like someone who is from the Pacific Islands. Someone, a little girl could look up to Moana and see herself in that character rather than just some princess that she likes but doesn't look like her, and it doesn't have to be really people, but it was real. I really like they're trying to do the region justice, and the music and the casting and the artwork. It's not exploiting an exotic region. It's making a story that's true to who these people are, as far as we can tell so far. Obviously, we'll have to wait for any of these movies for the final word and actually see the film. If you notice, the road or the image has gotten a little bumpier, and maybe the sound has gotten a little louder. It's because this is one of the horrible sections of Arizona Road that doesn't get repaired. Hopefully, all of this is recording well enough that you can hear it. If not, I'll have to re-record sections of this. So with Moana, they switched to Pixar, and the first was obviously The Good Dinosaur, which is due out this fall in November, and it's a film that we have a pretty good sense of from a couple of different trailers, but we saw several clips. And we got a little bit more of the story. So Arlo, the dinosaur, he loses his father, and then he gets washed down a river away from his family, and he sort of has to find his way home. And his companion is Spot, the human, who is more like a dog, who doesn't speak, but he kind of growls and he makes noises. And we were shown 4 clips from the film. The first one was just showing off the gorgeous landscapes. It is stunning. It's all inspired by the sort of Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon sort of region for the look of the settings of the film. But the first clip was Arlo being washed down the river, and then the second clip was one that we've seen part of in the trailers, which is Arlo and Spot at night in this field surrounded by fireflies. But the clip continued from there and really sort of helped set the emotional tone of the film. It showed Arlo, they're both down by sort of this river shore, sitting in the sand, and Arlo's telling Spot, who doesn't understand what he's saying, how much he misses his family. And Spot sort of looks at him, and so Arlo starts picking up stick. He draws a little box in the sand, and he puts sticks, and his father and his mother and his brother and his sister and him, represents his family, and he misses them. And then Spot sort of gets it, and he draws a little box and puts two big sticks and a tiny stick, and it's his parents and him. But then he knocks down the two parent sticks. They're dead, and he's all alone. And Arlo knocks down his father's stick, and they're both sort of they've lost their family. Some in Spot's case completely, that died. But Arlo's lost his father, and then is separated from his family, and Spot starts to sort of howl at the moon in this grief, sort of, letting his emotions out, and Arlo joins in. The next clip was the Ranchers clip, where Arlo meets these Tyrannosaurus Rexes, one of whom is voiced by Sam Elliott, and one of his daughters is voiced by Anna Paquin. And they're ranchers in that they have this herd of buffalo creatures that they sort of eat. But it's very much the whole setting was, set in kind of like a Western-looking setting, and the music was very much from a Western, and they want to use Arlo as a distraction to help them catch the rustlers, the cattle rustlers, who are preying on the herd. And it was kind of, without any context, it was just kind of a funny little clip, but it gives sort of a different view of the world that Arlo is going to be traveling through to get home. And then the final clip was Arlo and Spot running through the birds. That's also been seen in the trailer. And it was really beautiful. And it's sort of, as Arlo gains confidence in himself, he's very much a shy, afraid kind of character. But with him and Spot together, they sort of help each other to heal and to grow. And he starts to gain confidence in himself. So that was a good dinosaur, and we'll know fairly soon, as opposed to many of these other films, how it's going to turn out. It looks very pretty. It's the only issue I have, and I discussed this on my blog, is the scenery is so beautiful and photorealistic, and Arlo, as a character design, all the dinosaurs are sort of they're sort of cartoony, and that's not a bad thing. It'll just be interesting to see how that meshes. Next on the Pixar list was the movie that I was most looking forward to seeing. That was Finding Dory. Finding Nemo is probably my top 3 Pixar movies of all time. I think is maybe one of the most important movies in the history of animated film, in terms of the way it really expanded animation's audience from kids and their parents to everyone, and allowed films like Ratatouille and WALL-E to be made. So they announced Finding Dory, and Ellen DeGeneres, of course, came out on stage and huge cheers. And she's been one of the biggest advocates for Finding Nemo sequel. They showed a little montage of all the time she's complained on her show about the fact that everything else gets a sequel and Finding Nemo doesn't. But they brought her out, and they sort of gave this setup and showed one little clip from early in the film where Dory is living across the street, basically, from Marlin and Nemo, and Albert Brooks is back, but they had to find a new boy to voice Nemo because the boy who did is now 21 and doesn't sound like Nemo anymore. And the boy they got sounded really good, but they showed a clip where Dory had been out with Mr. Ray's class and got pulled into some undertow and sort of slammed against the rock, and she sort of passes out. And she wakes up and has this sort of flash for her kind of like at the end of Finding Nemo when she sees the sign that says Sydney and has this Speech Room 42 Wallaby Way Sydney flashback and realizes what's going on. She has sort of one of those flashes where she sees glimpses of her parents, who are, by the way, voiced by Eugene Levy and Diane Keaton, which is perfect casting. and she wants to set out to find him immediately, but then nobody knows where they are, and Marlin's trying to sort of stop, calm down, and then it cuts to a sequence where she's asleep that night, and she keeps swimming away in her sleep, and Marlin and Nemo have to sort of chase her down and grab her and bring her back, and over and over and over again, and she keeps mumbling in her sleep about the Jewel of Monterey, which is where she thinks her parents are. And it was sort of cute to see that they're not abandoning the character development from the first film, and that Marlin, he doesn't want Dory to just swim off on into this adventure that he's totally not prepared for. But she and Nemo make the case that, well, she needs to find her family, and he agrees to it eventually. But before that point, after she's swam away in her sleep so many times, he's eventually like laying there next to her while she sleeps, and every time she gets up to swim away, he grabs her and puts her back. He's sort of like, I was up all night because you're crazy. I'll talk more about I'm here at work, so I'll talk more about Finding Nemo after work on my commute home. Or Finding Dory. Somebody did that in the presentation. One of the directors said Finding Nemo, and he said the challenge with Finding Nemo, and he meant Finding Dory. And Ellen just stormed off the stage. He goes, no, the challenge with Finding Dory is the name, and not saying Finding Nemo every time we're trying to talk about it. But yeah, I'll talk more about Finding Dory in the second clip they showed and the characters they introduced after work, and then the one final Pixar movie, and then it's live action, which includes Captain America: Civil War, new Star Wars, and several other movies. So we'll cover that, which will be right now for you, but in 8 hours for me. Well, here I am 8 hours later, only a few seconds for you, heading home from work, and we'll continue on where I left off. We're talking about Finding Dory. There was one final clip that they showed of Finding Dory that occurs much later in the film, but first they decided they were going to introduce some of the new characters, starting with Ed O'Neill voicing an octopus, well, technically a septopus, a seven-legged octopus, who is a resident of the Jewel of Monterey, this Monterey Bay-like aquarium, where they do rescue sea life. He's joined by Ty Burrell, who voices a beluga whale who thinks he has brain damage because his head is so swollen, and doesn't realize, of course, that that's just the way beluga whales look. And then there's a whale shark character who is confused about what it means to be a whale shark, whether that's a whale or a shark. The final clip that they showed was after Dory has been rescued / captured by this aquarium wildlife rescue place. And she's tagged and put in a little aquarium in a kitchen preparation, food prep sort of area. Sorry, the road's kind of loud. And Ed O'Neill's octopus, septopus, who is capable of blending in with the environment, sneaks his way into the room, hiding against the wall and hiding among the pots and things, and he goes into the sink and goes to put some water in the sink and accidentally turns on the disposal and turns it off real quick. But he eventually confronts Dory, and he wants to make a deal with her. He wants her to give him her tag, which says she's going to be shipped to Cleveland because she can't be rehabilitated and released into the wild. So they're going to send her to a more permanent home, and in this case, an aquarium in Cleveland. And that's really where he wants to go because it'll be nice and relaxing, and everything will be provided for him. And the scene itself didn't tell us much about the the story or what to expect, but it was sort of stereotypical of the humor we come to expect from Dory. She's trying to negotiate with him to help her find her parents, and he just wants this tag, but she keeps forgetting partway through the conversation what they're talking about. So she'll say, "You can't have my tag unless you help me find my parents." And he goes, "Fine, I'll help you find your parents." "Oh, you can help me find my parents? Well, I'd love to give you something in return, but all I have is this tag." And as excited as I was for Finding Dory, the clips that they showed and this little sneak peek we got was not enough to really get me more excited. It's Finding Nemo is one of those movies that only works as a whole. You can take little clips out and they're funny, but it's hard to get a sense of the emotional arc of the film without having seen it all the way through. And so I'm not disappointed in any way by the clips we saw from Finding Dory, but it's not something like Moana where we can sort of get a real sense of the meaning and the emotion behind the story from a couple of clips. I feel like it's going to be something you have to see in the theater. It's also not a movie that I felt was really clamoring for a sequel. As much as I love Dory and want to see more of her, there are other movies like The Incredibles that would be much better off with a sequel. But I'm not going to complain about getting more Finding Nemo / Dory. I'm still waiting. I trust Pixar, and I'm sure they're not going to screw up Finding Nemo in any way with the sequel. But I want to see more meat to the story, I guess. And it's probably something I'll just have to wait until it comes out in theaters. Next on the list was from Pixar was the formerly untitled Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead themed movie, which is now called Coco, which is named after its protagonist, that 12-year-old boy. And we didn't get a clip of the movie. We didn't get any actors, but they had what they called a diorama, which was sort of a thematic, visual, sort of stylistic exploration of the movie. And it was, it opened with Dia de los Muertos, people observing the Day of the Dead, and they're in a cemetery and they've lit candles and altars to their deceased loved ones. And then the movie jumps to the day of the land of the dead, presumably, and it's sort of a Mexican village that's filled with these skeleton characters, the really colorful sort of skeletons that you're used to seeing, especially if you live in Arizona, like I do, around Dia de los Muertos. And they're playing mariachi music and they're singing and having a great time, and the camera sort of moves through this village of the dead, and there's typical skeleton jokes, people's heads getting knocked off and juggling skulls and that sort of thing. But then they're interrupted when one of the skeletons in the mariachi band is revealed to be this boy, Coco, who is alive and was just wearing a skeleton mask. And it's definitely intriguing, especially to anyone who lives in an area where Mexican culture is thriving, and it's it's a beautiful culture, and it'll be interesting to see how it translates onto the film. But we don't know the story, we don't know what Coco's doing in this Land of the Dead or any of that sort of thing. So it's really too soon to say what we might see from Coco eventually. The final film that they introduced was Toy Story 4. And now everyone knew Toy Story 4 was coming. It had already been announced. And we didn't really learn anything new about the movie. We did learn that Rashida Jones from Parks and Rec and Will McCormick will be writing the script. and then John Lasseter is directing once again. And Lasseter talked about how, they had decided they weren't going to do any more Toy Story movies unless they had a story that just absolutely had to be told. They needed to bring something new. They can't just keep rehashing the same characters just to make more money. All evidence to the contrary with Cars 2. But so they set it aside and they they weren't going to do anymore. And then they were having a meeting and they're just talking about things, and suddenly this idea came out. And the plan is for Toy Story 4 to be a love story, which is something they haven't done with the Toy Story series before. And it's specifically a love story between Woody and Bo Peep, who we haven't seen in a while. And Woody and Buzz are going to have to go on a journey of some sort to go find Bo Peep and bring her back. And that's all we really know about the movie. They brought out Randy Newman, who performed You Got a Friend in Me, which was very emotional and amazing. To a montage of clips from the previous Toy Story movies. And then they had Army Men rappel from the ceiling, and it was a whole big spectacle. But what we didn't get was any information about other movies that have already been confirmed or announced, such as Cars 2 or The Incredibles, or Cars 3 or The Incredibles 2. They had posters for both of these movies at the Walt Disney Films Pavilion, but they didn't have any new information to share. They didn't tell us any. What I really wanted to know about was The Incredibles 2. They didn't have, Brad Bird wasn't there. They didn't have any new info to share. But it was still a great presentation, and I'm really looking forward to Moana and some of these other films, especially Finding Dory. But the next day was the live action presentation, which people were even more excited about, especially now that Marvel's a part of the mix, of course, and now Star Wars. So that was part 1A of the D23 Expo movie news roundup, covered animation. Check out video episode 1B, which is the live action, which covers things like Pirates of the Caribbean and Marvel and Lucasfilm. Be sure to check out my blog, lovepirate.net. You can also follow me on Twitter or on Tumblr at lovepirate77. And be sure to stick around for a new video soon. Thanks.